Could the possibility of extended families, shared households, taking in a lodger or boarder, where we get economies of scale in our households, because basically our households are too small for redeveloping these household productions, food production, childcare, health maintenance, home manufacturing. We need more people in each household. The fertile soils, water supply and infrastructure that mostly exists in urban areas has huge potential for urban agriculture, sort of commercial agriculture producing food in what is basically open space, and also for garden agriculture in backyards. The potential in a lot of areas where water supply is a critical issue to recycle storm water, and also human waste in the longer term. So city farms, community supported agriculture, farmers markets, can these mechanisms start to rebuild the economies in our communities? So let's paint the picture of how this might be playing out in Aussie Street in the late 2000s permaculture retrofit. So, at number one, the elderly couple still hanging on. Number two is vacant and for sale. And it's the only unrenovated original house with its original carport and the porch and the veranda. And the remnants of an orchard out the back, but basically no garden at all. Now, a young couple who've got a small inheritance, they managed to buy this place, and he's a gung-ho permy gardener, and they move in, they've got a baby, and he starts up a nursery in the carport, and he's got all his plant stock out on the driveway, and he's selling from the street. I don't think he's got a permit from the council for this, but anyway. And they start redeveloping the garden, and they've got a chook house and tool store down the back, and a straw yard. And then his centrepiece is this chook tractor system, where he's actually growing veggies on a very serious scale, and he's selling those too through a sort of an ad hoc box scheme that he's started with a few people who started coming to buy his plants. And they've put in a little rainwater tank. They haven't got much money, but they really didn't want to drink the water that's chlorinated from the town, and they thought better to put in a rainwater tank rather than a filter, especially when the town water supply was then fluoridated. I don't know whether that's the case in New Zealand, but it is in Australia. So they put in a rainwater tank, and then they got a little bit more money, and they put up the greenhouse and the shade house with the vines over the top, big rainwater tank, planted lots more fruit trees, filled up the orchard chook run out the back, and there's the food garden out the front too, and on the street there's garden out there with a fruit tree and a nut tree. Now wait a minute, there's also this little diversion that sort of diverts water off the curb and channel onto the fruit trees. It's just this little bit of concrete, you know. I don't think they put in specifications to the Shire engineer, but anyway, you know, so they're irrigating the trees from the street water. Now, the next bit of the story gets complicated because they've got a friend who's just come back from overseas, and he hasn't got any money at all, but his parents are reasonably well off, and they're actually moving back to the city, I think from Queensland, or maybe it was from Queenstown. Anyway, they're moving back to the city because the grandparents are now very frail, and they're having to sort of look after them a lot. And anyway, the son and his parents get on really well together, and so they say, you know, why don't we buy the place next door and sort of, you know, get things happening together. So they move in there, and the son's a bit of a tech head, and he's into recumbent bicycles, and he sets up a metalworking workshop in what used to be the games room, and he's actually making bikes there. And they put a photovoltaic grid feedback system, because in Australia the power company actually pays you more for the electricity than you get charged, and it's still not really profitable, but as I said, you know, these folks have got a bit of money, so they do that. Now, their main concern is all these huge gum trees and wattle trees that are overshadowing the place on the north side. But they sort of thought they'd leave that for the moment because they're not quite sure what to do about it. They get rid of the fence between the two properties because, of course, the driveway over on the other side is all full of plants, and then both families use the driveway down the middle to sort of access both places. But shock horror, they've logged the garden. They've cut down all the trees, or most of them, and planted a few replacements out the back in a way that fitted into the design better. And they made a serious investment in a huge new rainwater tank, which actually takes the surplus water off both houses, and a big grey water reed bed system that takes the grey water. Now, I think they just did a diversion off the grey water piping system, and I don't think this is actually approved by the council either as yet. But it's all been designed to the very best specifications, and potentially, when the regulatory environment gets a bit more favourable, would be eminently able to be approved. Now, the big thing is they build this 12 square eco addition out of mud bricks and recycled materials in the backyard that gets basically all its heating from the passive solar design. And part of that design is great pergolas on the west side and the north side. And they take in a boarder who's a single mum with a baby, because they've got all this extra space, so they thought they better increase the household a bit. Now, at this stage, there's nothing happening between the son and the young mum, but you never know. And the porch was sort of a bit decrepit, so they replaced it with a greenhouse, which sort of became an entry space, and they've got this new veranda on the street side. And this does amazing things at improving the thermal performance of the older part of the house. And then they've got this fern garden in the courtyard out the back, and they draw cool air off that through an earth duct into a cool cupboard in the kitchen. So they only have a small underbench fridge, and the cool cupboard is most of their food store. So they're really into the tech solutions, but they're not really that much into the gardening. Well, actually, one of the other things is the young people get together and decide at a street party that they should build a bread oven. So they build this bread oven out the front, and they've got all this firewood to use after all. So that's sort of getting things going. And they do have this little food garden out the front, this little kitchen garden, but it's not doing that well because there's this whopping great gum tree overshadowing it on the street.